Monday this week, you might have seen the news story, but there's no reason you would. I was browsing global news, and I came across a news story that really caught my attention and made me want to read. 2-year-old may be the youngest person ever to reach Mount Everest base camp. Well, it's caught your attention too. I think it caught my attention because I've been in a season where I'm once again fascinated with Mount Everest. There's some really interesting documentaries and stories, and so I was already predisposed perhaps for Mount Everest to capture my attention. But the story goes like this. 2-year-old Scottish toddler is believed to be the youngest person ever to reach a Mount Everest base camp. Carter Dallas, that's a great Scottish name. Carter Dallas climbed, quote unquote, to the South Base Camp in Nepal on his father Ross's back alongside his mother Jade, multiple UK outlets report. The trek brought them 17,598 feet, that's 5,364 meters, above sea level, a dizzying height that can cause altitude sickness in even the most experienced climbers. Ross, a former sales manager, said that his son coped with the adverse conditions better than he and his wife. To quote, "We both got slight altitude sickness, but he was absolutely fine. There were 2 medics at the village before base camp, and they tested his blood to check that he was fine. His results were way better than ours. They were amazed." Of course, nobody can scale a mountain without training, and Carter is no exception. The hardy little toddler has been regularly practicing breathing techniques with his parents, and the whole family also does ice bath challenges together. Ross and Jade actually did the journey in normal running shoes with Carter strapped to Ross's back because it was actually not a premeditated activity. They were on a prolonged vacation and decided, let's do this. So to fast forward to the end, if Carter's world record is confirmed, he would best the current record holder, Zara, a dual Czech-Canadian citizen, who climbed to the South Base Camp of Everest at age 4. She was accompanied by her father, David, and 7-year-old brother. Okay. I read that story and I thought a couple of things. Number one, wouldn't it just fit that somebody from the old country bumps a Canadian as a record keeper? Actually, the real thing that hit me was guarantee that 2-year-old didn't get there alone. Guarantee you that 2-year-old didn't come wandering out of his playpen and say, you know what I want to do? I want to climb to the base camp. In order to do that, I think I want to do some ice bucket challenges day after day and do breathing exercises. And I guarantee you he didn't strap on his running shoes and say, hey, listen, if I get fatigued, Daddy's going to strap me to his back. After all, it's going to be a great climb. No 2-year-old does that. Well, I think about, it got me thinking about our Canadian Baptist Theological Seminary and College vision statement, training God-called men and women for 21st century leadership in tough places. We're on a trek. We have set our faces towards a summit. If I were really honest with you, I'd say some days it feels just as daunting as if we were climbing up Everest. When I think about culture, I think it puts a weight on us. Some of the headlines that I've read just in the last 7 days are these. Doomsday clock now set at 90 seconds to midnight. If you're not familiar with the doomsday clock, at the dawn of the nuclear age, nuclear physicists, particularly troubled, and those involved actually in the formation of the age in which we now live, had started to say, where are we in the countdown to midnight being the end of humanity, global holocaust, nuclear holocaust. And up until now, I would think in my lifetime, the closest we've ever come to midnight was right before I was born in the Cuban Missile Crisis. But it says 90 seconds to midnight. That's where the scientists have set the clock. Just this morning, following on the heels of yesterday morning, New York Times, Washington Post, several Christian outlets carry versions of a story that are predicting World War III is looming. It's kind of the reason why the clock is set at 90 seconds to midnight. I don't know about you, but I find it really difficult to just let that roll off me and go about my day. I add to that stories that I hear from inside the evangelical Christian community, even inside our larger Southern Baptist, Canadian National Baptist community. And I can feel the backpack weight growing as I set my face towards the summit of training leaders for tough places. I look at our culture. I just said it's an answer to prayer. I believe with all my heart that this pause has been set in place over medical assistance in dying. But there are lots of cultural influences that we're dealing with now on a regular basis that I wouldn't have dreamed about 17 years ago when I came as president of this school, let alone 28 years ago, almost 29 years ago when I came as pastor in South Calgary. The world has changed. And then we all add to that just our personal weights. Things that we are carrying and maybe nobody else knows, or maybe you have entrusted it to somebody else. The climb. And I would say just like that toddler didn't make the base camp by himself, we're not going to make it by ourselves either. We're in this together. I'm going to say it another way. We're not in this alone. And so really, I guess this morning, I want to say, what are some things that we need to be considering as we make this concerted effort towards training leaders for tough places, being leaders who have been trained for tough places? The impetus for each of these comments comes from time I spent with our faculty last fall. Meditations to start our prayer meetings on Tuesday mornings. And one of these actually I shared a bit about even at orientation. There are three things I want us to consider. This is not an exhaustive list. It's just simply a think about these things as we are in this together. The first is think about your countenance. Countenance is a word that's still in use. It's an older word. It really means just your face or your facial expression. I could choose probably several verses. I'm going to choose to go to Proverbs 15, verse 30. In the Holman Christian Standard Bible, it reads this way: bright eyes cheer the heart. Good news strengthens the bones. Bright eyes cheer the heart. Good news strengthens the bones. New Living Translation renders it this way: a cheerful look brings joy to the heart. Good news makes for good health. You know, there's an English idiom. I was raised with this idiom. When somebody was walking towards me or they entered the room and they were smiling and their eyes were sparkling, and there was some enthusiasm or brightness about them, we would say that person is beaming. I think that fits with this proverb. There's something about that countenance that just projects joy, enthusiasm, courage into those all around us. I think about this verse and I think about my dad. Of all of the people I've known in my life, I don't know of anybody that did this better than him. There's a lot of people who would do a lot of things better than Will Blackaby. But from the time I was 11 and 12 years old to this day, I marveled at his capacity to walk into a room, and by the time he walked out the other door, everybody is smiling and laughing and happier than when he came in. He would do that without even knowing what he'd done. Well, to be fair, sometimes he did. Sometimes he was premeditated, but most of the time he wasn't. He's on my mind because I haven't been able to shake his memory this Christmas. And now into this new year, as I've just been thinking about precious aspects to this man who was so instrumental in raising me. And I just pray, God, I want to serve the God of my father in such a way that I would have the countenance of my father when I walk into a room. What message does your countenance convey? As you walk the halls of this school, as you enter and exit classrooms, as a professor looks at you as they're teaching, or as you look at the professor, what does your countenance convey? What's the message there? Is it good news? You know, there's a thin line separating emotional health from physical health. We know this to be true. I know this to be true. Why do I know this to be true? Well, just anecdotally, let me just confess. January is it's a rough month. Maybe not for you. But that stretch from like August 1st to, no, really, it's like once you pack up your Christmas ornaments until sometime in March, my emotions are affected. I'm sure I'm not the only one. The excessive darkness, minus 32 doesn't help. Minus 32 and my car doesn't start really doesn't help. The weightiness, the lack of any kind of event, artificial or calendared, to look forward to. And you know what happens to me during this season? I just want to go to bed. I mean, right about now, I'm thinking, I best rush home, get my jammies on, because I don't want to miss bedtime. My emotional health does affect my physical health. But I don't think we're as compartmentalized as people as we think. And you know one of the antidotes to that? Your countenance as I pass you in the halls. The cheer in your voice, the good news that you chirp as you walk by. It's an antidote to that. What news am I sharing to lift somebody's spirits today? Do I invigorate people? Do you? Amplified Bible actually says, the light of the eyes rejoices the hearts of others, and good news puts fat on the bones. You might look at me and say, Rob, you've had a lot of good news lately. Noted. But you know, here it is. January's wrapping up in a matter of hours, and we're nudged up against February. We're going to be into another month of dark and cold before we start to see notably longer days and warmer weather. I don't know that the news cycle is going to grow more cheery in the next days. I don't know that I need one more story about what's happening in politics in Canada to make me feel bad. We've got to speak courage to each other. Here's my point. We've got to preach courage to ourselves. We've got to speak courage to each other. We need to cause others to take heart. And my countenance, if even my words don't do it, certainly your countenance can. Would you be one of those people who's saying, God, I want to be mindful as we're starting to make our ascent, as we're on this trek together, that my countenance has an inordinate influence on other people around me, especially in a small community just like this one. I'm not suggesting that we pretend. That's not helpful. I'm just asking that in the balance of our day, we ask God to open our eyes to those wonderful things that we might be blind to in the darkness of this Calgary winter. A cheerful look brings joy to the heart. Good news makes for good health. Okay, your countenance. What else do I want us to be mindful of? Things to consider. Your disposition. So Proverbs 21. I shared some of this with at orientation with our students earlier this month. But Proverbs 21 verse 31 says, a horse is prepared for the day of battle, but victory comes from the Lord. That's a good one, isn't it? Eugene Peterson interprets the verse this way: do your best, prepare for the worst, then trust God to bring victory. It reminds me of one of my favorite verses, which is Psalm 20, verse 7. Some boast in chariots and some in horses, but we will boast in the name of the Lord our God. I think planning is important. I think it's more effective. As a student, I felt like it was more effective to pray, God, would you please bring back to my mind all those things that I've studied? Then God, would you forgive my negligence? I haven't studied a moment. Would you fill my mind with things that I have not known up to this moment? I think preparation is important. I think before we get before a class to teach, I was about to say I can't speak for other professors. I know your professors. I can speak for them. They don't just show up on a morning and go, now what do I want to speak on today? They have spent hours in preparation, and then they come and stand before the class and say, now God, what would you like to do with this? It's always only been yours. Now what would you like to do with this class hour? But preparation is important, and it's helpful. Diligence is proper. I don't prefer students to start the assignment 12 hours before it's due and then just email it to me 30 seconds before class. I don't prefer that. I prefer a student taking time to soak in it and research and then produce an assignment that I'm excited to read. Makes it sound like I'm not excited to read I'm not excited to read all assignments, actually. But nobody in this room. Preparation is normal. But victory's not going to come through the efforts. And victory's not going to be because of my great and awesome plans. And that's the rub of it. It will come through God's goodness and love alone. I think, and of obedience to God, we understand our assignment to be here in this place at Canadian Baptist Theological Seminary and College. This is where my assignment is. This is where I'm putting my heart and my efforts right here. Whether you're a student, staff, faculty, we're all here in this community because we believe God's collected us together at this moment. And we're going to do our dead level best to plan and to work and to prepare, but never mistake the victories coming from God alone. Not even a little bit from me. Comes from God alone. There's no success without God. I want to say this. It's not the first time I've said it, but people don't need more of you, and they don't need more of me. I guarantee you that. They need more of Christ. Or could I put it this way? They don't need more Rob, they need more Christ in me. Matthew Henry, writing over 1662 to 1714, that's when he was living, so a while ago. I love this comment on this verse. Be the cause ever so good, and the patrons of it ever so strong and wise and faithful, and the means of carrying it on and gaining the point ever so probable, still they must acknowledge God and take him along with them. That's my disposition. I'm invited to join the winning side. I'm invited to join the winning side. I don't invite God to join my team. I celebrate that God has invited me to be part of what he's doing. And I'm going to make whatever adjustments I need to get on board with that. I ready my horse not because I think doing that's going to ensure that I'll win the battle, but because it will mean I can follow after the one who will win the battle. The victories don't belong to us. But by God's grace, Jesus does. And he brings the victory. Third thing I want you to consider is your effect. So your countenance, your disposition, but then your effect on other people. And here I want to go to Proverbs chapter 27 and verse 17. Iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another. I'm aware that the opinion is not unanimous as to whether this is a positive or actually a negative proverb. But it seems to me that the vast majority of commentators have taken it to be a positive. So I feel like I'm in good company to say, along with the Amplified, Bible, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens and influences another through discussion. I think the idea that we get dull in life is obvious, isn't it? So, in another context here on campus, I've shared, one of my favorite possessions that I have is my dad's knife. I think I might have shared this in chapel. My dad flew for the Royal Canadian Air Force. Part of his uniform, flight uniform, was a beautiful knife that you would wear to cut parachute cords if you ever had to bail out. And my dad kept that from the time he was a young pilot through his life. The last time I was ever with my dad was Christmas of 2021, and I had gone downstairs to kind of root through some tools. I was going to try to help fix some things for Mom and Dad, and I found this knife. Now, you got to know this knife. It's just a knife, and yet to look at it, it's Dad. And how many times we've been in the woods whittling hot dog sticks to roast hot dogs and marshmallows, or just downstairs in the basement of our home, just whittling away with my little knife and his big Air Force knife, And so I had said to Dad, that Christmas, Dad, do you care if I have this? Oh, Rob, please take it. Matter of fact, the night that my dad passed away, it was what I had of his. I just sat there holding it, thinking of him. And I took it out of the sheath, and I ran. He always liked to have it really sharp, and I ran my thumb over, and it was really sharp. If I were to show you that knife today, I would have to tell you, in all honesty, be careful when you take it out of the sheath. It's so sharp it'll slice your thumb. I haven't used it one time. But that's not why knives exist, are they? The moment I start using it, and I will start using it in honor of my dad, I'm going to have to learn to use the flint that I also took from Dad to sharpen it again, because just the normal, mundane ins and outs of life dull us. It dulls the blade. Ecclesiastes 10, verse 10. If you're in pastoral ministries with Dr. Watson and myself, I'm going to be sharing this verse next month as we kind of venture into administrative pieces of the course. If the axe is dull and one does not sharpen its edge, then one must exert more strength. However, the advantage of wisdom is that it brings success. You've got to sharpen the blade. Because if your blade's not dull, you can't be using it. Can I just say, if you're feeling dull here, like most of us do, by somewhere around late October, early November, somewhere around April, early May, it's probably because you've been cutting a lot and it's time to stop and sharpen the blade. And it's possible that as our lives rub up against each other, that I can be flint to your blade, and you can be flint to my blade, or iron. The only image I have that gets close to what I think this looks like is a chef that sharpens his blade on a piece of metal. Have you ever seen that? Our lives rub up against each other. I want us to be intentional in the way that we sharpen each other and don't add to the dulling effect on each other. In this regard, I want to, as I'm kind of coming full circle, I want to get into the King James Version. Now, this is the first time I've probably read a verse in King James in quite a while, but let me tell you what I memorized this verse as and why it's important. In the King James, this verse is carried this way: iron sharpeneth iron, so a man sharpeneth the countenance of his friend. Things to keep my mind on, my countenance, but the fact that I also influence your countenance. I have an effect on you. God can use us in each other's lives. We speak in such a way that faith is appropriately encouraged and our spirits are bolstered. And I can't shake this thought that one day it might be asked of you and me, how did God accomplish what he did in your life? I pray our answers include this. Because of the gloriously precious CBT community that God had surrounded me with. Because of that community, I was cheered when I didn't feel like I could take another step, when the atmosphere was thinning and my breaths were more labored and I didn't think I could press on. But they cheered me on and I took my steps and I made it to the base camp. They encouraged me. They encouraged me when I didn't know which way to go. I didn't think I had it in me. I didn't even know what the assignment was that God had for me. And they just encouraged me to press on, not just because they were going to watch me through a set of binoculars, but because we didn't want to go without you. We're all moving up the slope together. That we exhorted each other because we saw something in each other's lives and we said, you know what, you're never going to make the altitude that you need to make unless you lose this. It may well be what the 40 days of decrease will accomplish in all of our lives. I pray it is. That somehow we will exhort each other so that we can press on with more diligence and purity. That we comforted each other because somewhere along the way, at least once, in all likelihood, often, we'll be buffeted by something and need to have somebody come and put their arm around, or a community come and put their arms around us and just say, we're here and you're not alone. Sometimes the most palpable expression of the presence of God is him moving through his people to come put their arms around you and say, we're with you. And that together, because of all of this, we got to explore new heights. We got to go to altitudes we never thought were possible. And by the way, it doesn't happen just on this campus. It happens for the rest of our ministry lives, wherever God takes us. That we're community. That our countenance somehow will encourage each other. That our disposition will be one of trusting God for victory and doing everything necessary to prepare to follow him into that victory. And that my effect is that your countenance is cheered as well. Those are some things to think about as we're still in the early weeks of a new semester. Let's pray. Father, thank you for the community that you've blessed us with called Canadian Baptist Theological Seminary and College. Thank you for the promise of a new semester. And I pray that you would continue to use us in each other's lives as influences for good health, good news, rejoicing and joy, cheering and exhorting and encouraging, so that together we continue to make spiritual progresses on the high places to which you've called us. We pray this in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.